Hi everyone, welcome back to another edition of my videos, and in today's video we're going to be focusing on the next fourth move alternative, which is the move bishop takes on c6. This is known as the exchange variation. So the whole purpose of this, white decides, do you know what, I don't want the c6 knight there. I'm going to create some pawn weaknesses for black and remove one of his key defenders of his central pawn. That's essentially the idea. This line, it leads to quite solid play for white, but I'll be honest with you, I don't think this line causes too much trouble for black. I think he can quite easily equalise. Some of the resulting endgames do tend to be quite favourable for black as well. So here, by taking as well, black is going to have some pawn weakness created. So here I would recommend you take d takes on c6. So we now have double pawns that we have to work with, but by taking away from the centre, this allows us to be readily able to capture on f5 if this pawn were to ever capture. So there's a few interesting little variations here. Just very quickly, if e takes on f5, we actually get a transposition to one of the first lines we looked at in the Yanish Gambit accepted. So after this is a transposition to that line we did look at. You've got the draw variation here if you decide to want to go into it as black, as well as some alternatives that you could play for. So, but going back, after this, there's a couple other moves that potentially white could play that also don't lead to particularly good play. You might be wondering to yourself, can white just capture here on e5? Unfortunately, this is a very, very common trap in the Spanish. It's probably the first trap you ever learn when you're looking at the Spanish variation. And against this, you can just simply play the move queen to d4. You're forking both the pawn and the knights. So white is going to lose one of those pieces. You might be asking yourself, though, can white play h5 here, throwing in the check? Unfortunately not, because sadly we are able to defend this position with just the move g6. Notice here that both the knight and the queen are under attack here, so the only way to save one of the pieces is to sacrifice one of the pieces by playing knight takes on g6. You might be wondering to yourself, if I capture here, can the queen take the rook? Well, sadly, because the queen is on d4, it now adequately defends this rook on h8. So white doesn't have the luxury to be able to take here. And like in a lot of other sort of variations where the queen comes out early against an early f5. So white could play the move queen takes on g6, but black is going to do absolutely fine here. After the move king to d8, white is just simply down in material. He's only got his queen developed. It's actually going to be quite difficult for him to develop some of his other pieces, particularly if he tries to move this bishop, because once this bishop moves, this b2 pawn then falls. So it's going to be very, very hard for white to say, well, he's not equal, let's put it that way. Black has got I would say, quite a decisive advantage here. So just an example continuation, let's say d3, getting ready to get the bishop out. We can then just hit the queen with the knights, developing and also hitting the queen. If, let's say, bishop to g5, pinning the knights, well, as I say, you can then just take on b2. This isn't a great variation at all for whites whatsoever. So yeah, I think you'd be very happy if you saw this over the board. So going back then, so as I said, that queen h5 idea doesn't really work. They could play knight to f3 here. Again, this is absolutely fine. We can take the pawn. We've now equalised the material, but we get another bit of advantage here, as after, let's say, queen to e2, we've got two moves that were, I think knight to f6 is probably slightly more accurate, but I think queen takes on e2 is absolutely fine as well. As after king takes, we can then just develop on d7 and get ready to castle long. I think black's position is absolutely fine here. We've got the bishop pair. White's king is stuck in the centre. and we're going to be able to castle safely, and I think this is an absolutely fine position. Black is more than enough to have a pleasant endgame position, and probably equality to being slightly better in this position. But going back, knight to f3 I think slightly more accurate. If let's say knight to c3 now hitting the queen, here again we can just capture this queen off. The king can no longer castle. Bishop to d6, we've just got very pleasant development. We're going to be castling our king next move, and we've got this bishop pair that I think that more than enough trumps the fact that we've got this slight pawn weakness here. I think actually black has just got a very pleasant endgame to play with. So yeah, I think black should do absolutely fine. So going back then, so as I say, those early little traps, they just don't work for white. You might find your opponent try and do it, but as I say, you shouldn't have to worry about these. I think you might see those maybe in the blitz matches, maybe not so much over the board. But the key move here and the mainline move is knight to c3. So now, simple move, you're developing a piece, you're controlling the centre, you're defending this pawn as well on e4. And against this, we're going to continue with our systematic move here, f takes on e4. So capturing one of white's central pawns on our flank pawns on the f pawn. Knight captures back. We can play knight to f6. And we're concentrating on development. We're going to get our bishop out to a good square and then hopefully castle as soon as possible and take over the semi-open file. Notice by capturing this as well, I should have also forgot to mention, whenever we capture on e4 with our f pawn, we give ourselves this lovely semi-open file to start attacking down. We don't need to worry about moves like knight takes on f6. I think black would be absolutely happy with this, as now we can play queen takes on f6. We've developed a piece. We're going to be able to speed ahead of our developments and have these two, this bishop pair to work with, and these nice sort of dynamic pawns here. With this isolated pawn, although sometimes a weakness in most positions, in actual fact this is just a really pleasant piece. Again, I'll just show you a quick example continuation. Let's say a move like d3, bishop to g4, h3. We just get our bishops developed, start creating some pawn weaknesses for black to contend with. Here, actually, after exchange of one of the bishops, this position is absolutely fine. We've actually got, in my opinion, better pawn structure than white here. As we've got this doubled isolated pawn, this isolated pawn over here, not a particularly great pawn on d3 as well, that we can potentially make targets. We've also got a lovely choice to either castle both long or short. Both ways are absolutely fine, as they will be attacking one of white's pieces in the process. So I think a very pleasant position to play with here. So going back then, as I say, lots of moves. White needs to be the one who's needs to be careful here, as if he just plays one little inaccuracy like that, you can just see how black will just either get a very decent endgame or just a nice position to play with. So here, queen to e2 is probably the best move, as it just concentrates on its development. It's defending this knight. Here, bishop to g4 is a nice move. We're just getting another piece developed. h3, now hitting the bishop. Capture on f3. Queen captures, and we can start swapping off a few pieces. You might be thinking that this isn't ideal. We don't really want to be swapping pieces when we've got this pawn weakness. In actual fact, I think actually black's doing absolutely fine here. The resulting simplification just allows black to get quite a decent amount of activity here. Notice again, white's pieces haven't really developed at all. Black is ready to get his bishop out, is ready to castle long, even short as well, and start sort of creating some problems for white to deal with. Here would be very happy. You'd be over the moon if queen captures here, as if this ever happens, this is absolutely fantastic, because we can just take back with the pawn. We're controlling the centre. We've just got a decent position here. I can't see how white could say they're any better here. He's got no control of the centre. We're ready to, as I say, develop our pieces, castle long, castle short if need be. So instead of this, you're most likely going to see the move d3 being played against you, after which bishop to c5. This is just a very pleasant position, as you can see here. You know, white is by no means got any real advantage, in my opinion. We're going to, if white just starts liquidating pieces off, we're going to have a decent endgame to play with. It's still not, I would say, you know, a totally overwhelmingly good position for black, as we still got a double pawn to have to deal with. We still got this potential pawn weakness to have to deal with as well. But I think there is, you know, the nice activity that we get in this position more than enough compensates for these potential weaknesses, and I think black should do absolutely fine here. So that's pretty much it for the exchange variation. As I say, you know, it seems as though in a lot of those lines there, it's white who needs to be doing the safe footing, as if he makes one slight miscalculation or one slight error in some of his move order, he's going to find himself, you know, getting on sort of the receiving ends to a very, very poor position, or, you know, a knockout blow from black. But regardless, even as you can see in this mainline position, I don't particularly think white has got that much of an advantage here at all. We can see that we're going to be able to get our pieces really active, really good squares, and be sort of doing some fast kingside attacks, fast attacks on the white king. Okay, so I hope you enjoyed this video. In the next two parts, we're going to be focusing on probably the two, I would say, sharpest variations of the Schliemann. So stay tuned for that, and you'll see some, you know, or I guess maybe get yourself your seat belts ready, I should say, because it's probably the most complicated positions I've ever seen in chess, some of these next ones. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this video. Take care.